All right, good evening, everyone. I'd like to call the Program Personnel Committee meeting to order, and we will start with the Pledge of Allegiance. Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay. First item up is public comment. So if there's anybody that would like to speak to the board, there are microphones at the table. And I am seeing none. Last chance. All right, moving on. Up for discussion, item A, Digital Citizenship and Wellbeing Committee presentation. Okay, so I think Dr. Herman is going to be taking us through this with Ms. Toderick.
Okay, thank you, everyone. Thanks for welcoming our committee to talk with you about student cell phone use in our classes. So in the fall, questions were coming up from various members of our community about student cell phone use in schools and in classrooms and kind of what our district policy and practices are related to that. So we convened a committee from our health and well-being strand of our strategic plan work to explore this issue. These are the members of our committee. As you can see, we have great representation from both Vernon Hills and Libertyville High School, representing various roles within the building, various disciplines, and positions, within and also the district office. So thank you very much to our committee, who spent a lot of time and energy exploring this issue that, as we know, is changing very rapidly, and there's new news about this every day. So the process we went through was to really understand the research and local and national landscape. And as I said, you know, the news is changing every day. In fact, just after we submitted this to the board packet, we found out that Governor Pritzker's proposal for cell phone bans in school had just passed through the Senate just last Wednesday. So this is moving very quickly, both nationally and locally. So we're excited to talk with you about what we've learned and what our process has been. And so as our committee shares, they'll introduce themselves and talk about each step of what we've learned thus far. We just wanted to start with our current language, our board policy language, which is also the same, of course, as our student handbook, which, as you can see, states that students can have cell phones and devices at school, but the expectation is that they're not using them during class, unless it's for instructional purposes or at the direction of the teacher. So with that context in mind, we'll share, Dr. Nelson will share a little bit more about the research and the state and national and local context around this topic.
Okay, so we know that this conversation is happening everywhere. This is not unique to District 128 by any means. So there have been some real influential books and documentaries that have really catapulted and catalyzed conversation around this issue. I don't know if you guys have seen the documentary, The Social Dilemma. That was kind of the first, like, whoa, like this is something that everybody needs to watch. It's on Netflix if you want to see it. But then there's been a number of other influential thinkers and researchers around this. Screenagers has been kind of a through line conversation that has been on the scene here and among many school districts around the country. And then Jean Twenge, I don't even know if I'm saying her name right, but is a psychologist and researcher who has influenced this with her book, iGen. Stolen Focus, a few years ago, we had a District 128 University book club around Johan Hari's book. He is a New York Times journalist. Really, really great book. And then most recently, The Anxious Generation by Jonathan Haidt, that really exploded the conversation specific to mental health and the research around social media, phone use, and a number of things related to that. So we know that youth often use cell phones to access social media, and then social media in turn is linked to poor mental health. In 2023, a survey of adolescents found that 51% reported social media use for at least 4 hours per day. It's a lot of time, and probably adults wouldn't be super far behind that. But adolescent social media use is associated with higher rates of anxiety and depression, exposure to harmful content, the effects of which adolescents are more susceptible. A number of other things that have been found to be associated with high social media use is body dissatisfaction and eating disorders, especially among girls. So sleep issues, negative neurological effects, cyberbullying are some of the other really major issues that research is really pointing to as being profound impacts of a lot of phone use. And then most recently, things like as the conversation gets sharper and more detailed, attention fragmentation is a really major problem. And like, so when we're talking about cell phone use in the schools, in the classroom, just that those moments that a phone can pull away that attention is really profound for a young person's education. So there has been this real strong call to action for phone-free schools, and then just how can we use technology in a more intentional way. Go on to. So interesting, there has been, when phones first came out, everyone said no phones ever in schools. And then post 9/11, they kind of came back relative to concerns around maybe emergency needs with cell phones and kids needing to contact parents. And now, as more research has come back, the wave is turning back to like, how do we use this and help kids use their phones in ways that they need to, but not in ways that are harmful to their education. Let's go on to the next slide. So most recently, Governor Pritzker, I mean, if like we were just talking beforehand, if we had this conversation back in the fall, the list of states that had made legislation around this would be about this long. And like, as of last week, it had grown significantly. So most recently, Governor Pritzker's proposal to ban cell phones in classrooms passed the Senate, and we understand it's now going to be going to the House for consideration. So here in District 128, just some things that have transpired. Here, there's conversation everywhere about it in a lot of different nooks and crannies, both in terms of staff, in terms of student conversation. So I'm going to turn it over to Lauren Shea and Sophia Jackman, who are on our Principals Advisory Board. We have a prevention and wellness student committee, and that has that on their own started talking about this very issue. So they're going to share a little bit from their perspective.
Yeah, so just to start, we actually did come up with this idea on our own. We were just discussing prevention and wellness, and we're like, oh, cell phones, like that's the first idea that comes to mind. And it's obviously huge in classrooms. I feel myself like if I even have my backpack or my phone away in my backpack, it's still like something in the corner of my mind is telling me like grab it. But like the further it is away from me, the better I can pay attention. And I notice that a lot in classrooms, especially when teachers do give students the autonomy to have their phone on them and trust them to put it away. But it's really difficult to enforce that because, I mean, kids will have their phone out. And when teachers try to give like a gentle nudge, just like, hey, can you put your phone away? So-and-so happens over and over again. And it gets distracting for everyone, not only the teacher, because then they're like, oh, wait, I forgot. Like, what was my train of thought, And then the flow of class just gets interrupted and it's difficult for everyone. And once again, like Dr. Nelson was saying, like the attention pull is just huge. Like for teenagers, like our minds are impressionable. We just want to grab the phone. And while we think we have the self-control to stay away from it, we really don't. And I think just overall having a cohesive policy throughout all of classes will make things a lot easier as well, because some classes you can have it, some classes you can't. So just having an encompassing cell phone policy will just make life easier, I think, for everyone.
Yeah, I agree. I definitely think that we should have a cohesive policy, and specifically, I think we should use cell phones as attendance for students. That's one of the things we talked about in the principal advisory board, and I just feel like that would be very important because, like we were talking about, like making students more engaged and allowing them to focus more. I feel like that would be very helpful, and also less distractions with like if you don't have your phone out, it's like less distractions and students are more focused on the schoolwork. And also another thing is with the cheating, I feel like if their phones are away and up on the cell phone hotel, it'll help with less cheating when it comes to tests and assignments and all that for students.
Hi, I'm Greg Stilling. I'm one of the assistant principals at Vernon Hills High School. And I'm just going to talk for a few minutes about, we did a staff survey to see what their perceptions were about this, and then a student survey to see what their perceptions were about cell phone use. So based on our staff survey, a lot of our staff is already using some form of a cell phone hotel or someplace the cell phones to go that's away from the students during class. 2/3 of our teachers use it every day. So this would not be a shock to the system. Most teachers have done this already to some extent. We also talked to our ESP who work in the classrooms. They agreed this is a very effective tool to limit phone use. The biggest concern amongst our teachers is the different practices we have currently about cell phone use makes it hard to enforce. So when we asked teachers about expectations, they said the biggest thing we could benefit from is a consistent expectations. Let this kind of just become how we operate as a school instead of all teachers doing a little something different. The LST agrees that would help tremendously in enforcement and kids working with us on this. And when we surveyed the staff, 88% could get behind a universal use of cell phone hotels. And now to talk about her experiences in our classrooms as one of our math and PAWS teachers.
I'm just going to echo what you two said. You said it beautifully. But really, as a teacher, I'm feeling the same. So I've been a math teacher in District 128 since 2007. Throughout my career, I've seen technology evolve significantly, bringing both many, many advantages that I use every day, and then there's also the challenges that you guys spoke of. Like many educators, I've experimented with a variety of approaches to managing cell phones. I've had no policy. I've had let's keep it in our pocket or our backpack. I've had let's keep it in the cell hotel all 45 minutes bell to bell. Since COVID and maybe a little bit earlier, I found the most success using the cell hotel system in my math classes, and has had a consistently positive approach on the classroom environment. Some of the things that I've noticed is it reduces temptation. Even as I sit here with my smartwatch and my husband's texting me, I'm like, oh, what's going on at home, right? Like they're having the same experiences in the classroom. Increased engagement from the kids. One of the big things I've noticed is actually the healthier social interactions. So if there's a few minutes of downtime during class, the kids will actually talk to each other and they will maybe like do some mindfulness instead of going straight to their screens. It's improved my classroom management quite a bit. I've been able to concentrate on teaching instead of policing the cell phones. That said, without a consistent school-wide policy, it's kind of been tough to enforce it on a daily basis. Some students need frequent reminders to use the hotel or find ways to kind of bypass the expectation altogether. When students keep their phones on them, I've observed obviously distraction during instruction. As I said, even when it like lights up or buzzes, they're so tempted to look at their phones. Academic integrity. So teachers spend a lot of time writing assessments, and when those are compromised, that's tough. A lot of shallow learning too, especially I have the experience of being in the pause classroom. Kids will automatically turn to an app, for example, Photomath or ChatGPT, to try to help them jump into a problem right away instead of having that productive struggle. It's hard to monitor as a teacher too. So the earbuds are like becoming a thing where they just cover with the hair, or even when we ask them to stay off, it's like kind of in their lap. So I agree. I think it would be wonderful to have a more unified school-wide approach with clearly defined consequences, just to make a consistent learning environment for the kids, clear expectations, and hopefully lead to improved learning outcomes.
All right, so now I'm going to talk a little bit about our student survey we put out and what our kids' perceptions are. I found some of this interesting. So kids reported it's very easy to limit their cell phone use at school and at home while doing homework. I can tell you our staff would disagree that it's easy. And in fact, our 2 students who are here seem to be agreeing it's not that easy. So they shared with us some of their methods for limiting cell phone use. The biggest one being just put it on do not disturb so they don't get a notification or anything, which makes a lot of sense. Our students also shared with us some reasons why they have to have their cell phone on them. Like, why is it important that I have it here? One we heard several times was for medical reasons. And I know that's absolutely true. And we have always worked with students and parents. If there's a medical need, they have to keep their phone on them. We can handle that. But some of these other reasons, like I need to contact my parents, feels like that could happen in a passing period. If there's an emergency, call the main office. We'll come get your student. Some of the other things, though, they did mention is, while they say they can limit the use, they absolutely recognize that a benefit of putting phones away is, increasing their attention on school and limiting distraction. They also mentioned, which I think is part of what Brenda was speaking to, just the social interaction. Like, this is now a generation who has grown up with cell phones, and they don't interact socially the same way as previous generations did. So they recognize that as a potential additional benefit. And some kids said there's no benefits. Let us keep our cell phones at all time.
I'm Mary Toderick. I'm the communications director for the district. And I am going to talk to you about our conclusions after doing all of the research and surveying. We clearly see that the wording of our current policy is sufficient, but the problem lies within the implementation, and we need to strengthen that. The implementation can be enhanced by increasing consistency among teachers, by messaging, and by that I mean have a plan in place where we're continually telling students and teachers and families, here's why we're doing this, here's the importance of it, here's the benefits of putting your cell in the cell phone hotel, and also increasing our student supports regarding MTSS. Next slide. Our committee recommends that we increase the consistency and the supports and encourage the widespread use among all of our teachers of the cell hotels, that we promote a community-wide learning about the why and the how related to putting the phones away, and a healthy relationship with students and their devices. And again, implement a tiered approach for supporting the development of knowledge and skills related to the use of your phones and all of your devices, digital citizenship. Looking ahead, excuse me, our committee, as well as others who will probably come on board to support the rest of the work that needs to be done, would be creating messaging and communication to our parents, students, and staff regarding the importance of this work, developing the tiered supports for students, and continuing to engage with our students and families around like all of the books and the movies and things that we can share with them related to the importance of putting your cell phone away. So that is our report, and we appreciate you letting us share that with you. And do you have any questions? Yeah, Lisa.
Thank you so much for your work. It's a big committee and it's a lot of work, and it's one of those big nebulous subjects that is not always straightforward to dig into. So thank you for bringing your work to us and for all the time you spent doing it. It's especially nice to see students at the table. In addition, a teacher, because we need all the voices at the table so that we can be successful as we move forward. I think you touched on this. Could you be a little bit more specific when you talk about messaging and communication? Specifically, my concern is the policies, lowercase p policies, procedures that will be followed consistently in classrooms so that students and parents are very clear not only on what the expectation is, but what the consequences are for not following the policy.
So with the messaging, obviously that is yet to be done, but we would want to take time to have some presentations to staff, to have people like Jess talk about their experiences, kind of, I hate to use the word sell it, but with a C, not an S. And I didn't even plan that.
You're all week.
To make it a grassroots effort, to have our own people who are doing it teach the others the importance of it, and also with our families and with our students, making sure that everyone is on the same page. This is not a new policy. It's just a policy that we need to pay more attention to and be consistent with. So it would be a whole communication plan, and probably posters and things on the website and social media and all of our means of communication.
And just as a quick follow-up, I've been following the legislation that came out of the Senate and is going to the House for a vote. The governor will sign it when it comes out. Will we have the time that you're envisioning to move towards implementation and the communication of the expectations to students and parents, as well as any disciplinary action for not following it? If I'm just wondering if the statewide policy could force us to speed up our efforts, or is there a longer runway in the policy wording that will give us the time that it sounds like you're planning to implement this carefully and thoughtfully?
I think, you want to? Okay. I think that a lot would depend on if he passes it, or if the House passes it. What is the deadline for doing it? Is it immediate? Do we have till the start of the next school year? I think our thought was, if it happens and it's for the beginning of the school year, we've got that runway of summer to work on it. But a lot would depend on what those deadlines are.
Yeah, and I think too, the fall being a time, right, where we come back and talk about what do we value, what are we about here, will be a really good natural time to kind of engage in this conversation with students. And I think some of the like logistics around the student concerns and the staff concerns, like related to emergencies and, you know, needing a phone for medical purposes, those kinds of things we'll have to kind of just think through more procedurally what that will look like. And I know that's accounted for in the bill that's going through the state as well, or the motion, just because those are, of course, things we need to consider. And so being really, thoughtful around all of those procedures, in addition to that like larger why campaign. So we were excited about this timing, knowing that this can be kind of the soft launch right now, and then take some time in the summer, as Ms. Toderick shared, to really work on that campaign, and then in the fall engage in that district-wide dialogue with students and families.
I just had a quick follow-up on this too. I appreciate the on the one side, it says promote community-wide learning about the why and how related to healthy engagement. And I think that's almost as important as
Mhm.
you know, removing them from
Mhm.
students' possession during class, that kind of thing. I think that's really the key, the crux of the situation we're in. And I think that could be, you know, that's a big process in and of itself. And that will be also an evolving process and how you approach that. But I would encourage you to keep that in mind and with all the communications and as we move forward, because it's one thing to just say, nope, we're going to take them away and put them over here during class. It's another thing to say the reason why we're doing that. And this is how you know, how we start to change how we interact with these devices. I do want to bring up one question, and I don't expect an answer, but it's one that's going to sit in the back of my mind for a while. And that's something a couple of people sort of alluded to, and that is I put my cell phone over there. Now, mine buzzed once during this conversation, which I thought was ironic. But if I put my phone over there and I still have my smartwatch, it's going to buzz too.
Mm.
And so I'm not too sure how we address that. Do we have a hotel for watches too? But it's just, I'm putting it out there. I don't know that there's a perfect answer for that, but that's just something in the back of my mind. No, thank you for your presentation. It was great information. Thank you.
I had a comment and question. Okay, so first of all, I'm so glad this conversation is really coming into its full fruition, and I'm really looking forward to seeing what shape this ultimately takes in the district. I, for one, have been so, I think, energized around this issue personally for a few years already, and very admittedly consider myself a disciple of Jonathan Haidt. So this to me is like my language. But I did have a question in your presentation. Thank you for all of that data and information that you gathered from staff and students. My question was, when you guys refer to a tiered approach, what does that mean? What does that look like? We know about tiered approaches in so many other aspects of education, but what does that look like in this case?
Yeah, good question. So thinking about the universal experience will be kind of what are our expectations for all students in all classes related to having the cell phone away. And then also that education around the why and kind of the values related to that and just kind of who are we as a community and why is this important to us to be able to engage. And then looking at kind of when a student's struggling with that, how do we respond? So that's what we mean by that tiered approach to kind of what are our next steps when somebody is struggling with that and those individualized circumstances that might need, special considerations or a different approach. So looking at that at the kind of preventive level and then also responding to students for whom that universal approach is not sufficient or that, they need more support in meeting those expectations and or have individualized circumstances. Does that answer?
Yeah, I think so. And then I also just wanted to kind of discuss more broadly, and I'm sure you guys know this, but digital citizenship education ends earlier, I feel like, than we need it to for our kids. My son is now a 6th grader, and it's basically fallen off the radar, whereas our media specialists used to handle that in elementary school. It's really not part of the academic conversation anymore. And I would assume even more so as kids get older, right? So I think there is so much importance surrounding that almost direct instruction. How do we avoid becoming, owned by our phone? How do we do that? What are the strategies? I mean, as adults, we all experience it too. It doesn't just miraculously end when you turn 18. It gets worse, in fact, I would say. So, how do we model that for our kids as they move through our system, but then as they are moving on to independent endeavors of their own, phone in hand?
Yeah, we've talked a lot about that too, and how this work intersects with all of our work with like SEL and mental health and helping not only provide that structure for students, but help them develop the skills, the inhibition and the engagement and all of those like social, emotional, and life skills, and how to safely navigate the internet and those kinds of skills. So we were seeing this as kind of our first step, but then we've had all of those conversations too around like where is this happening, where are these conversations taking place in school, and how can we kind of enhance that school.
Well, I will when I reference some of the conversations that have been happening among students at our Wildcat Summit in January, total spontaneous conversation among about 100 students, just about cell phone use. And no adults prompting that conversation. And then in the committee, one of the things that really stands out to me that they were saying is like, when if something new rolls out, we need to have like coming from students, why is this important? So, to your point about the why and the how, but to have meaningful conversation around it, because it's not just about like chuck the phone, because there is always going to have that buzz. Like, what do we do inside our phones to further keep us from distractions in terms of turning off notifications, and why? What is it doing to our brains, and what is it doing to like just the richness of our lives? So thank you.
I would say a couple things, right? Like one recommendation I would have is that as you roll out the plan, plan to have parent/community volunteers as a part of the plan, because that would help enforce it at home. And students talking about experiences on how they've dealt with it, because I will tell you from personal experience, I was there where I was on my phone for work purposes. And I was telling myself, oh, I'm just doing it for work and responding. And it became a me thing rather than them. I remember being on a vacation at the beach and I wasn't looking at my cell phone for a few hours, and panic had struck at work because I had not responded to an email in 15 minutes. And I realized that was not them, it was me, because I'd set that expectation. So to step back, that was a me thing. And that's where parents come in, community comes in to say, what's the result of that? I would almost call it an addiction to our cell phones and devices, and how do we figure out ways to cope with it?
I wanted to add, I don't want to belabor this, and thank you so much for sharing your perspectives, the student perspective and the teachers. I know in my own district, we call it away for the day, but they're 6 and 7, so we get away with that. But I did, as I was going through the presentation, and as a undiagnosed phone addict myself, working on my own, how to put it away, I worry, and having students that have recently graduated, the substitution. I mean, I talk to my kids in college, and I wholeheartedly agree with putting the phone away, but it doesn't eliminate the problem of the disengagement and how, every student has to have their Chromebook. And I know this is a balancing act. So I think it has to be a part of the conversation that you're not substituting, because they are going to have their tablet or their Chromebook. So any policy or any rollout, when you talk about the why, has to be, it doesn't matter if it's the phone or it's the Chromebook, we're getting you to be engaged. And that is, I think you have to think about that as a part of the policy, or at least the implementation.
Thank you all for this work, especially our students here. And I know it's not an easy conversation when some of your friends may not agree with you. So thank you for that. The only thing I will add is, as you think about the tiered approach, when I was listening to it, to me, it still feels like a carrot versus a stick approach. I know you want to start with the carrot, help people understand, but eventually you got to say, is this working or not? So maybe have some kind of measurement in there to see, I've sold this concept to all my teachers, and we still don't see a consistent implementation. Kind of what would you do next, right? Would you just pull out those teachers who are not and go with that? Or are you at some point going to say, this is, like, put something in the student handbook? Like, at what point do you make it this is real, you're going to have consequences if you don't listen? I think keep that in mind, because I have a teenager too, and it's not an easy conversation to have at home either. But thank you.
Thank you.
I was wondering as well what we meant by more consistent. So does every classroom right now have a cell hotel?
No.
So I would say by
Most.
fall,
Yes.
every classroom will have one. So then the expectation will be that day in and day out teachers are using the cell hotels. And then to your point, if it becomes the expectation, then that's just something that goes into evaluations. So first thing of every class, the cell hotel is utilized, and that's a checkbox in the evaluation. So anyway, thank you for all of the work that you have done. I agree that the policy is appropriate, and I agree that we need to do something. So thank you.
Thank you.
Any other comments?
I just want to add, just to clarify as well, that from our understanding of the bill that is in Springfield, now it could always be changed with amendments and things, but from our current understanding of it, if it were to be implemented, it is aligned with the recommendations of this committee as well. So we would not have to redo this to align to any new legislation coming out of Springfield. And so that piece is important. The other thing I just wanted to comment on, this committee did an excellent job looking specifically at the cell phones. And we also had a question from the board about our continued work with AI. So we as a district have been last year at this time, we brought forward some AI guidance to you. We've been monitoring our AI implementation this year. That has been going very well. We still have some occasional student use of AI for academic dishonesty. When we catch that, we address it, we deal with that, but our teachers are not reporting widespread use of AI for academic dishonesty. More and more of our teachers are using AI as a teaching tool to help them. The greatest, and we're still learning this, but where we're really utilizing it is for differentiation of resources for students, in particularly students of different language abilities and students of different, with different individual education plans, where we can do kind of classroom accommodations and make sure that students are able to access the curriculum, but that different resources are being provided to help students who have different learning needs. We've audited our use of AI materials as part of our budget cycle, because we wanted to determine which tools does the district want to invest in for our teachers and students, and which do we just want staff and students to use like the free version of. And next year, our district will be implementing a universal license for all staff to use what's called DFIT AI. DFIT AI is an AI software that is designed specifically for teachers to help teachers differentiate instructional materials. It's an extraordinary program. It's getting more and more powerful. And so every single teacher in our district next year will have the premium license for DFIT. AI is being introduced into all software programs, as you're aware. And so next year, what we anticipate doing is creating sort of a teacher and student kind of user group to advise our district technology department about the AI programs that are being used, and kind of the needs of the students and the staff, so that we can continue to make sure we're providing the right tools, and equally as important, kind of blocking the tools that we see as being not productive for a high school setting.
Very good. Well, thank you very much. We appreciate your presentation. All right, the next item up for discussion, item B, is the ISBE Discipline Improvement Plan.
Thank you. I am presenting to you the discipline improvement plan that you have seen attached to the board agenda. The reason why we have to put together a discipline improvement plan was, as identified by Illinois State Board of Education, ISB, that we had a racial disproportionality in the number of students of color that were out of school suspensions. So there are 3 criteria on whether or not you are identified to have to submit a discipline improvement plan. And that was the reason why we were identified by Illinois State Board of Education. So Dr. Jessica Herman and Larry Varn, Director of Equity Inclusion, will be working together with the team members that they have all talked to and had conversations with to address our racial disproportionality. I think it's important to note that, the work that Dr. Herman and Larry will do in our goal of reducing our racial disproportionality rate by the 25-26 school year. And that was outlined in our discipline improvement plan that was submitted here on the board agenda. You, as a board, it has to go before the Board of Education, and then we need to then submit it to the Illinois State Board of Education. If you did read, it said it had to be submitted to ISB by February 1st. For some reason, we didn't get the information from ISB until the end of March. So we were not, lax in our duties of getting this information. They sent it to us late, and we jumped on it right away. So,
Does it require board action, or just does this presentation suffice?
you guys will have to approve it at the board meeting at the next one. And so we will put that at an action item. It won't be in the consent agenda.
Good. Any questions? Moving on to employment of employees. I'm going to note 2 of my former colleagues are listed there, so I want to just shout out, yay for them.
So this is our employment employees. As you can see, we're getting to hiring season. So these will be on the consent agenda at the next board meeting. We'll probably also have some other items that didn't make it to tonight for action at the April board meeting.
Okay, item D, annual educational support professional staffing report.
Yes, so we are bringing the annual educational support professional staffing report. If you recall, we started our process of staffing back in the fall when we put the curriculum together, students started choosing their courses. Some other things that you as a board have taken action on is approving our administrative contracts in February, approving our certified staffing report in March. And so now we are bringing our ESP staffing. So our ESP staffing, we consult with our building administration on all of our positions. And so our positions, they run from your administrative assistants in the buildings to paraprofessionals, to campus safety, to IT. So there's quite a few number of ESP across the district that are integral to our education. We then also review any programmatic changes that we're looking at. So there are a couple things in here that are programmatic changes. One of them was the recommendation that came from the Joint Committee for the Intervention Program. So if you recall, the joint committee that got together to look at our intervention program made some recommendations. We approved our intervention positions on our certified staffing in March. As part of this, we did look at a reduction in some of our ESP tutors, but we kept some of our ESP tutors. So we kept math tutors at both buildings. We actually increased our part-time math tutors at both buildings, and we kept a science tutor position at Vernon Hills. We also kept our executive functioning tutor positions in those positions at both buildings. However, we did decrease our English and our science tutor positions at both buildings. Again, the joint committee headed by Dr. Tom Clennis looked at that, reviewed all of that information. We had conversations with our ESP union executive board in looking at that. Some of the other things that programmatically we looked at staffing for our assessment and accommodations. So over the years, I think the workload that goes into both accommodations for testing and our assessment, due to AP, due to state testing, due to everything has increased. We've had that staffed by some of our certified staff with just release time. So we have, through certified staffing, we've worked on some of those positions that are able to handle staffing, but they also need help in the buildings at the ESP level. So our additions on those positions were listed as assessment and accommodations administrative assistants. The other things that we are, driving the ESP staffing are really our paraprofessionals, and those are driven by our student needs and our course requests. And so if you really look at, special services, EL, physical welfare, they're, a big driver of our paraprofessionals. And so due to our students, again, their needs and their course requests, there is some reductions at Libertyville and special services, reduction at transition pathways, but increase at Vernon Hills. And then also, we listed it, the district office as a 0.2 occupational therapist, but our OTs work between all 3 buildings. And so that's the way that we have it in our staffing, in our employment management system. So really, when you're looking at the overall district staffing, it's a -1 in ESB staffing. And so that's our recommendation. There's also obviously the human side of our staffing, because there is some reductions in our, in these positions that are occupied by people. We have individual conversations with all of these individuals that were affected, with some openings, however, in special services, particularly at Vernon Hills, due to some of our aides, special services aides, have moved on and to student teaching. And actually, one we recommended to become a teacher for us next year. So some of the things that we were able to put in the ESP contract, tuition reimbursement, release kind of their job, holding their job while they go and student teach. We do have openings at the tutor positions. Will have jobs for next year in special service. We also know that there's going to be probably some turnover in some other positions. And so as of right now, we have jobs for every person. So there is no reduction in force action that you have to take at the board meeting. And again, we had individual conversations at the building level with all the people. So that is our staffing report that I'll bring back at the board meeting and do a overview for your approval.
Brian, is the assessment and accommodation administrative assistant new positions in both the buildings?
Those are new positions in both buildings.
And what does that role look like? I mean, what is the purpose of that role?
So that purpose of that role is to work with our certified staff and our Director of Data Assessment, Charlotte, and to work with our assistant principals that oversee teaching and learning, and to work with their administrative assistants to help coordinate all of the accommodations for all of our students, and then work with the assessment that we, have to do throughout the year. Some of that might be communicating directly with families also. So there's a lot that goes into it, and it keeps growing every year. And it has just, we've seen the need now to have these 2 10-month positions. So they're not 12-month positions, they're 10-month years.
Anything else? Okay, very good. Moving on to educational tour requests.
Only one this month, and that is the standard. It's the VHHS Business Professionals of America. This is part of their competition cycle. So they are a dominant force to be reckoned with, and they will be going to Orlando, Florida to compete. Normally on an ed tour, students are not missing school. This one, due to the competition dates, we have no choice, but it's something that kids go to every year. So it's pretty standard from our perspective.
Congratulations to them. Item F, the 25-26 textbook adoption requests.
Yes, so every year, Teaching and Learning brings to you, the board and the community, the books and that we are recommending for adoption. This says textbooks, but it's also, in today's world, digital resources that are used as a primary teaching instrument in the classrooms. So We don't have an extensive list this year. New textbook for AP Chemistry. Algebra 1, I wanted to highlight that. That is both math departments, Vernon Hills and Libertyville, did a year-long investigation of what would be the best resources to use for Algebra 1, as we, of course, are wanting to address our student math performance. They both settled on Amplified Desmos, which is an online resource as well as print resource. So that is a new kind of approach to Algebra 1 we'll be taking next year. Our English Learner program continues to grow. And with Spanish language arts supporting native language instruction, we have textbooks for that program, as well as some traditional desk atlases and online access to world atlases for geography. All in all, this year's adoptions is approximately $52,000. That would be budgeted as part of next year's budget cycle.
Right. Item G, the driver education waiver renewal for simulator use.
Yes, we are. So the state of Illinois has a law that says students need 6 hours of on the road, behind the wheel time. However, Illinois high school districts can provide a waiver where we can go up to 2 hours using a simulator. So in order to do that, we have to have a public hearing about that. We have to give notice, and then you as a board would send that waiver forward to the State Board of Education. This is something that we do every 5 years. We're allowed to apply for this waiver. Remember, Vernon Hills does not have simulators, so they fulfill the regular behind the road requirements. Their program is set up a little bit differently than Libertyville's. Libertyville has the simulators. So this waiver is for Libertyville High School to utilize simulators for students to complete their behind the wheel instruction for driver's education.
Okay, no questions there.
I do have a question. I'm sorry. When I was reading this over earlier, I didn't know that there were no simulators at Vernon Hills. I didn't know. I haven't taken driver's ed here lately. But can you kind of speak to that and why the discrepancy between the two schools?
So going back for several years, part of it has to do, I believe, with the size of the schools and the way that the student program is designed. Libertyville has what they would call a 3-cycle program where students are on the road, in the classroom, or in the simulator. Vernon Hills is just on the road and behind the wheel. I don't know the origins of that. It's been more than 10 years that the programs have been different in that way. I'm going to look at my historian Bryant to see if he remembers, when that started.
It's been a number of years, I think, since they haven't had simulators at Vernon Hills.
Yeah.
I think some of it had a little bit to do with space and then number of students.
And we asked when Libertyville, when I was principal here, Libertyville was getting new simulators. This was several years ago. And we asked Vernon Hills if that was something they were interested in. Both schools are very satisfied with the programs that they have. In my checking around the state, most driver's ed people would say that it's sort of 50-50. You can run a world-class program without simulators, and you can run a great program with simulators. So our schools evolve differently in that way, and Libertyville uses their simulators to maximize the amount of students we have in the building who can access driver's ed. Vernon Hills, with a smaller student population, doesn't face that same challenge and is able to function without them.
So in your professional opinion, no disadvantage for not having them at Vernon Hills?
That is what Mike McCallew and the driver's ed team there believes. That I have no reason to doubt that. Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
All right, moving on to item H, the board meeting management system.
Yeah, I'm going to turn this over to Carol. I'm just kidding. Put her on the spot. But I do have to acknowledge Carol. Carol was did a lot of the work behind this in looking at what management system that we use for our board meetings. So going back before, board docs, we used to use Google docs and PDFs. It wasn't easy for our board to manage board meetings. It wasn't easy for administration to manage it. So at that time, we did look into moving to a system, and we moved to board docs. However, much in education, things change. Board Docs is owned by Diligent, so it's a different company, but they are sunsetting Board Docs. And when they notified us of that, Carol started doing some research and looking at, what system should we be moving to? Well, when they were sunsetting Board Docs, they also said, hey, we're moving to this other system, and we are going to increase your price. And that's when we started looking around, and IASB, so Illinois Association of School Board, they partner with Board Book. So Board Docs and Board Book, two different, kind of companies, but we looked at the difference in the cost. We looked at the difference in the usage. And for $8,000 a year, over $8,000 a year difference, almost $9,000 a year, we thought that it would, be a good time for us to move to, Board Book for FY 25-26. I've given you
So
some examples.
We'll save $8,000 to $9,000 by moving to a board.
Yeah. Yes. Yeah.
Will-
And there, some other schools, District 68 is using it, District 70 is using it, so Oak Grove, Libertyville, and then District 127, Grays Lake, a high school, are using it. And Carol also spoke with administrative assistants at other schools, and we believe that the move to it will be, I don't want to say seamless, because there's always hiccups, but close to seamless. And moving to it, and we'll be able to train the current board members and the new board members on the system.
What about all the data that's in board docs?
So we are working on how that will be housed then, moving forward, so that we still have access to our information.
It sounds to me like there was a transition no matter what. I mean, with board docs, they created a new system that we would have to transition our data to anyway.
Correct.
And I can tell you, I personally have used Board Book and actually was involved in the deployment of Board Book. And for what we do, they're very, very similar in terms of the capabilities for what we see and how we navigate. And in fact, Board Book, not long ago, maybe about a year and a half ago, did a major refresh on their product. So it's
Correct.
It's been a bit updated as well. So
Yeah, I don't have an opinion about which system we use. I just want to know that we can access
Oh, for
the
sure.
5 years of data.
And we
that's
need
housed
it.
in-
We need it too, because
Yeah.
we use it quite a bit, and
Of course.
kind of, okay, what did we do, 4 years ago? And
Very good. Carol, thank you for that. All right, item I, 25-26 draft of committee board meeting schedule.
so you do
Probably go
have
back to
a,
Carol again anyway.
This is Carol again. But you do have a draft of a committee and board meeting schedule. We do realize that we will be seating a new board in April, but we also want to get this information out there. We do have, some board members that will be still on the board, and get that information. And again, if we, even if this gets adopted, changes could still be made to the schedule moving forward. But we have, I think, looked at any of the religious holiday schedule and moved meetings as needed. There's a January meeting that there's usually Ed Red, so our legislative dinner in the fourth week in January, so that was moved to a Tuesday. And again, most meetings are the second and the fourth Mondays. And then in the, you'll see in July, there's only one meeting in there.
And this actually will be, it's sort of a precursor to the next agenda item. This will actually be adopted by the new board as part of the onboarding process.
Yes.
No pun intended. But this is, this is a normal thing to do every year.
So for those new board members in attendance tonight, that's the one that you've been looking at really closely. All right, so on to item J, reorganization of board meeting process. That's just to familiarize the board members here and the oncoming board members what the process will be for transitioning to the new board.
Yeah, and I had actually suggested putting this in here. There's a script document that everyone can see, and it's mostly just so that we understand, and for any of the likely new board members that'll be joining us. We look forward to that. But I think probably the only twist in this is because we have only a few of us remaining on the board. The first thing that happens is I appoint a president pro tem, which can't be me because I'm currently the president. Can't be Mithlesh because he'll be taking the oath, and the president pro tem administers the oath of office. So we only have one option for that. So when that time comes, I'll be nominating or appointing Lisa, the president pro tem. The rest of this sort of flows down, and we appoint we take nominations for president, vice president, secretary, that kind of thing.
And if I recall, once the first thing that the president pro tem does is ask for nominations for the president. And once that person is elected, it's turned back over to the president, and the president pro tem is no longer involved.
Yeah. So just so that we're all on the same page and understand that that's, it's not arbitrary. We're sort of in a position where that has to happen. So, and the rest of that, and then part of this document, includes the schedule and for board meetings, that type of thing. So,
And if I recall, this is exactly the same process that we use every 2 years. There's no changes.
Yeah. Yeah, it's in fact, a lot of it's outlined in board policy. You can see the links to the board policy and the content there as well. So, and I believe all that's public accessible. So anyone wants to review that, they can see what that looks like.
Okay, future agenda items. Those are listed. If there's anything that anybody else sees as necessary to add. So then I will adjourn this committee meeting and turn it over to Dr. Batson with the apology that I ran 35 minutes long.
You can run 35 minutes long on your final committee meeting here, leading your final committee meeting, so which we greatly appreciate. So let me get back to okay, so we will call the Facilities and Finance Committee meeting. Everyone's good. We don't need a break or anything, right?
I'm good.
Yeah, okay. Call to order. We've already done the pledge. Invitation for public comment. Anyone want to address the Facilities and Finance Committee? Hearing none. Okay, we'll move on. First up, student internship presentation.
All right, while we get this set here, for our board members, for several of you, as this is, I guess, technically going to be your last committee meeting. I can't think of a better way to start it. So we've got Zach here, and I won't spend too much time. I'll let him introduce himself to you. Can you guys see over there? Is that good?
Mm-hmm.
All right.
We got to tell Zach's origin story, though.
Please.
So we have a new class this year at Libertyville and Vernon Hills High School, our workplace internship class, and it's part of our Exploring Multiple Paths program, and it allows students the opportunity to sign up and to conduct internships in areas that they're interested in. And actually, Lauren Vogue is here. She is the teacher at Libertyville who runs this program, does an extraordinary job. And Lauren contacted me back in the fall, early in August, and said, I've got this young man, Zach Seiler, and he was really interested in doing an internship around finance and investment banking. And we really couldn't find anyone for him to be connected to. And so Zach, he got stuck with Dan and I. So, I said to Zach that he could work with me on doing curriculum work around exploring multiple paths and helping to build out our business curriculum, because Zach took many of our business classes here and had ideas. He has a passion for business education, wanting our students to be as prepared as possible to move into investment banking or other finance positions after high school. And so he was interested in working with me on that, but he really wanted to get his experience also looking at numbers and looking at kind of some of the more harder kind of data around finances and investments. And so he worked with Dan to come up with some projects for that. So Zach could talk for a long time about his work with me, but tonight he is going to focus on his work with Dan, and Dan's going to take it away. I just would say that Dan and I were fighting over Zach's time because we realized he's much more than a student intern. He is a young man with a very bright future. And if he wants to be a future CSBO, that's very much on his list. But as far as I'm concerned, he could be a future superintendent because of the way he thinks about curriculum as well.
Yeah, thanks for that, Tom. We also, through the internship, part of it was trying to find out something that would be meaningful, not to just check a box for him, but something that would actually serve him in what he's interested in, but also selfishly, something that would actually help me as well. And so we tried to think of something real, and this is about as real as it gets. So with that, I'm going to turn this over to Zach, and also thought it would be great to come and talk to the board. And so this was the time that worked out for it to happen. So Zach, feel free, go ahead, get going. Just let me know when you want me to change the slide.
Yeah, thank you very much for the introduction, Mr. Stanley, Dr. Clentis. I appreciate you all being here and giving me the opportunity to present. I'm going to give you a little bit more of an about me, past just my work with our superintendent and superintendent of finance. I'll try not to give you my whole life story, but I'm a Libertyville native. I'm a senior here at LHS. Big base into baseball. So we're pulling away from Lake Zurich right now. So I'm rooting for my guys. As far as involvement at the high school goes, I try to do my best at leaving an impact. Just to name a few, I've participated in Green Dot and Link Crew. Those are two programs we have here at the high school for bettering the community. Link Crew, I'm able to leave my impact on the incoming freshman class. Green Dot, improving the spaces around our high school, and that and more. I could go on, like Dr. Clentis said, for a long time, but the big one I would say is I run a club at LHS called Young Investors. It's centered around my passion for finance and my passion for educating people to follow that same passion that I have. To get more specific with what brought me here is exactly what they said, that internship workplace, a program that I joined. It's brand new this year. They just brought it back, and so it was a little daunting going and joining the class, but I'm so glad and blessed that I did. Just to highlight some of the projects that I've done with Mr. Stanley and Dr. Clentis. With Dr. K, I'm working on improving the business curriculum. So we are investigating our shortcomings and researching possible solutions to those shortcomings in the form of student surveys, talking to past students. We've networked with past students and also collecting data associated with course participation. With Mr. Stanley, I've looked at real estate. So we had a submission for what our property is being used to the government, because Vernon Hills High School sits on a land grant that we received from the United States government. It was formerly the Nike site. And so I got to help with the organization and the reporting to the government with that. And I performed a cost accounting project. So, accounting basics, determining the real cost beyond just the surface level cost of doing a baseball facility here. And now I am presenting to you our district investment project. Mr. Stanley provided me with our district investment portfolio, and I've done some exploring of our investments, updated the rates, but also went a little past, and Mr. Stanley prevented me with the question of, can you find me a baseline for our portfolio of performance? And that evolved for me into, how can we better evaluate the performance of our district investments? The first way we need to address this question is by looking at our core values as far as why the district needs to invest. Whenever we look at our investment strategy, the district highlights a low-risk investment strategy. We participate a lot in bonds, CDs, funds, and government agencies. I want to highlight that our participation in funds isn't the typical mutual fund or fund of companies and stock that you might think of, but rather a fund of high schools, a collective high school fund that is a low-risk investment called the ISDALF fund. Secondly, limiting liquidity exposure is very important. As a district, we want to limit our risk associated with not having liquid assets. We have to have enough capital and cash so that we can cover expenses in case of emergency, but also so that we can continue the flow of real estate, learning, and other district improvements that are so vital to our students. Finally, retaining buying power is the main goal with our investment strategy. When we consider our goal for investments, it isn't the purpose of our investing is not to provide a stream of income. Our power with taxing and property taxes especially provide a sufficient stream of income. So when we consider why we invest, it's important to remember that we're investing to protect against the depreciation of our capital assets, which includes buildings aging, but also inflation. So with this in mind, there are a few avenues that I explored before ultimately coming to the benchmarks that I selected. The first one that came to mind for me, it was the federal funds rate. It is a good option, but there are a few reasons why I didn't specifically choose it. The federal funds rate is a benchmark assigned by the Federal Reserve. It is very influential as far as the cost of interest goes among the United States, and it sets the interest rate for a lot of assets sold by banks, but also assets sold by the U.S. Treasury. The drawbacks that I experienced with the federal funds rate specifically is really the federal funds rate does not take into account interest rate sensitivity. Basically, that is how much the price of securities change based on fluctuations of interest rates. But secondly, which I found more specifically pertinent to what I ended up selecting, was that the federal funds rate is not a security or asset that we would be participating in or investing in. It's rather a marker, of the Federal Reserve, and it's what they're releasing and what they're saying they want interest rates to be. It's not a tangible asset which we will go and invest in. Similarly, I consider the S&P 500. It's a very popular benchmark for many portfolios, and it's a good indicator of economic health. However, whenever we think about our goals as far as a district goes for investing, it doesn't pertinate to us because of market volatility. Recent events also show very well why we can't invest in the stock market, and it's too volatile and it wouldn't allow us to protect against our liquidity risk. And because of that, the S&P 500 would not provide a suitable benchmark for our district's investments. With that being said, there were two benchmarks that I came to the conclusion for, which covered our investment goals as a district very well. The first being CPIU, which is the Consumer Price Index for all urban consumers. It's an inflation metric, and it tracks market baskets of goods for typical urban consumers like yourself or myself by tracking the increase in those market baskets of popularly consumed items. So, gas, anything you might buy at the store for groceries. And then our average U.S. Treasury marketable securities are, U.S. Treasury securities are debt instruments issued by the U.S. government to raise funds for our national debt. They're backed by the faith of the U.S. government, and they come in the form of securities, typically bills, bonds, TIPS, which are Treasury inflation protected securities, and Treasury notes as well. The distinction made for our purposes are marketable. A marketable security is a security that is more easily sold and resold on exchange markets than non-marketable securities, which I will get into a little bit later of why I made this distinction. Specifically, why these benchmarks were chosen. First, U.S. Treasury marketable securities serves as a global benchmark for interest rates and the cost of borrowing globally. They are the most significant piece with U.S. Treasury securities are that they're free of default risk because of their backing by the U.S. government and faith of the U.S. government. And many financial institutions' fixed income securities rely on the interest rate of these specific securities. So not only does our district hold securities that are U.S. Treasury securities, but we also hold CDs and other securities that are from financial institutions. Well, those financial institutions' securities also rely on the interest rate of the U.S. Treasury securities. Lastly, popularity and large volume of trading on active exchanges of these securities produces a narrow bid-ask spread. This is significant because it displays the demand worldwide for these securities, and it shows us that they are a fairly liquid asset, which aligns with our mission of liquidity risk. The narrow bid-ask spread embodies the liquidity, like I said, of these assets, and that protects us against non-liquid assets. Secondly, the CPIU inflation measurement, it is the embodiment of how well we're retaining our purchasing power, so that being one of our goals as far as our investing goes. CPIU also gives us the ability to evaluate real return capabilities. So when we want to evaluate not just the interest rate return that we're getting from our securities, but what is the real return? Are we making any income from our investing past just the interest rate that we're receiving? And also CPIU and inflation as a metric is very universal and simple. It's easy to understand in the presentation of our district investments, and it allows for clear communication of district investment performance. So this is the graph that was put together using these benchmarks. The data from treasury.gov is our average weighted yield, our total marketable securities yield, and the U.S. Bureau of Labor Statistics is our CPIU metric, both very reputable, and they both report on a monthly basis ahead of the district, so we can continue to update this chart as we move along. Whenever we look at this chart, it's nice to see that our performance as a district does model the total marketable securities trend, and that displays an effective approach towards investing. When evaluating this graph as well, we want to, it's easy to kind of look at the spike in the CPIU and there are abnormalities that may happen. Whenever those abnormalities do happen, we take a step back and we evaluate whether or not there was, a missing link in our investment strategy, or if it was just a market abnormality. With CPIU in 2022, obviously, COVID-19 has heavily affected inflation, and because the district can't unfortunately predict a national epidemic, there's not much we can do. But what we can evaluate is we can look at the graph and we can say our average weighted yield was actually increasing in that time in which the market was hurting very poorly. And overall, that would be a success for our investment strategy. And
I remember one also thing you said was, even in the period where a spiking CPIU, you notice that the total marketable securities didn't have the extreme volatility as well.
Mhm.
Can you talk about that for a second?
Yeah, and that's why the total marketable securities is the benchmark that is kind of selected. Is whenever you take a look at the S&P or other market benchmarks, it will display volatility as it pertains to inflation because the market and stocks move significantly different than securities, the security market does. And with that being said, whenever we're trying to avoid the volatility, we want to look at our security market because it isn't affected as greatly by inflation as other benchmarks might be.
Yeah, these are, so part of this was to create something real. And so going forward, my plan is to use those benchmarks in our monthly investment reporting, because to the point of what we said before, we can report on our weighted yield, but give me something to compare to. How well are we doing? Like doesn't sound like we can compare to the S&P 500 because they're playing by slightly different rules than we are. And that's why I really appreciated Zach's idea of the total marketable securities to give us a benchmark, to give us a sense, but also CPIU in the sense of comparing ourselves to what's happening with inflation, both in terms of buying power in a portfolio. So I thought those are really helpful. And the easy and simple is really helpful too, because those have links that we can go to, we can download the data, we can upload it. It's very quick to get the data and to do that on a regular basis, because this is something that would just be part of our operations going forward.
Yeah, and I just want to thank you guys very much and open the floor to any questions you might have about this project or any others.
Yeah, thank you, and well done. Look forward to. I hope you follow that path towards a CSBO, because some school district
And a superintendent.
and a superintendent. Yeah.
So sorry, I didn't mean to cut you.
Yeah. Go ahead.
So I had feedback for all of you. So first of all, I'm going to say for you, excellent presentation. It had Dan written all over some of these. I think I want to give you some feedback. The slides were simple. You had a lot of white space. Most importantly, you did not read your slides. Always keep in mind that's a pet peeve.
Mhm.
You explained terminology that many of us would not know. And to me, as a listener and a reader, I could tell that you knew what you were talking about. So really good job on the presentation.
Thank you very
I
much.
think
Thank
the
you.
more you develop that, it's only going to help you in your career. So excellent job there. I do want to call out to both of you. I have an intern as well. It takes a lot of investment of your time to make the experience for them meaningful, so they will actually want to do that more. So I know it takes a lot of effort. So thank you for that. And just for me, it's fun to watch this. When I first put my name in to run for the board, this was an important thing for me that students get outside experiential experience. So thank you for putting this together on my last committee meeting here. It's very nice to see. Thank you and good job.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Zach, I just wanted to tell you I'm absolutely blown away by this very high level presentation for a senior in high school. I don't know what I was doing with my life back here at LHS in 2001, but clearly you're doing a lot, and that's fabulous. You serve as a testament to the incredible education you're getting here in district, and how lucky Dr. K and Mr. Stanley are to have worked with a young man like you. Man, I can't believe you kept this secret all semester. I would have been bragging my head off about this kiddo. But this was too cool. We do not get enough opportunity to see this real life stuff here in board meetings, and this was just such a treat. So thank you for coming and presenting.
Thank you for having me.
How long did it take you to explain to your parents what you were doing?
This weekend, I told them, oh, by the way, I will be missing the baseball game on Monday. I have a presentation and you're invited. So,
And much credit
Believe it
to
or
your
not, that's
parents.
not long.
Thank you for sharing him with us.
Anyone else?
Just thank you. So impressive. And what are your next steps?
Yeah, so I just this weekend put down my deposit, and I am going to attend Southern Methodist University next fall. So yeah, thank you very much. I will be pursuing a degree in finance at the Cox School of Business, and I'm joining a few programs there. I'm going to be a BBA scholar and a Hilltop scholar. So that's program. Hilltop is a program for leadership. So they have a few classes and service programs, and with service hours and outreach with the community. And the BBA Scholars is a honors program within the business school, where I get to collaborate with other like-minded individuals and network, but also I get access to a few programs. Like they have a career acceleration program, so I'm really excited.
They're very
And,
lucky to
yeah,
have you.
Thank you very much.
And if you are quick, you probably can help them clean up the field. As a baseball mom, you are excused.
Thank you.
Anyone else?
Did you say? I just wanted, because you're going to go and we still have more of agenda, but I wanted to get a chance to tell you this publicly with everybody watching. You did such a great job, not just with this project, but with every project you did. You worked hard, you were thoughtful. And even this project is more than just getting numbers on a spreadsheet, as we've talked. Like, presenting this idea to a board is a leadership level. And you did such a great job. And I just encourage you, keep going, keep leaning into your passions. You're very gifted. Keep going. And I'm just excited to just see where things take you. But you did an excellent job through and through, from the presentation to all the other work that I've been a part of working with you. So I'm really proud of the work you've done. So thank you.
Thank you very much.
So, kind of finalize this part of the presentation. This is what our Daring mission is all about, and the work that we're doing to develop our students. More and more of these opportunities are going to be presented to our students, and my hope is that you'll see more and more of these presentations as a board in the future. So.
I forgot to add one, but I love the fact that you explained the number slide and all the different lines and how they mean and interact with one another. So anyway, just wanted to call that out.
Thank you.
Yeah, very well done.
I mean, everyone's saying thank you. I echo that, but I actually say sorry to the people who are following you. It's a hard thing to do, to follow this.
Okay, thank you again.
Thank you very much.
Moving on, next item, budget hearing date. Back to Dan.
Yeah, so we need to set a date for the hearing for our budget. And so there's really two realistic options. Either we schedule the hearing on the date that we actually would adopt the final budget, or we would do it at another date. I would recommend scheduling it for the June 9th hearing, which would mirror what we did last year. Good news is I will be here this year, because I forgot that I was out of town when we scheduled that last year. I will be here this year. And so I would prefer to have it scheduled then. I know we're going to have a new board soon, but I'd rather pick the earlier date. And then if the new board wants to change, we can change it to a later date, but I'd rather not set a later date and then change it to a earlier date. So, yeah, that's what it is with the budget hearing.
What's the last point? Like, is there a time frame when we need to have that? If there are recommended changes, can we make those changes up until what point?
We just have to have public notice of the hearing 30 days prior.
Okay.
And so roughly what this means is we would need to put a notice in the paper no later than really Friday, May 9th, to have the meeting on June 9th. So there's a little bit of time, but we need to at least pick something now, and then we can change it later. But come real soon, depending on the timing, you might not have a choice. So I'd rather just stick with the 9th right now, and then we can adjust later if we need to.
Okay. This requires action at the upcoming board meeting to set this?
I don't think it technically requires action, but we've for the last little bit of time, we've taken action just so that it's very clear to everybody this is when the date is.
And I would suggest we do that, and we do that at the part of the agenda where the new board members are seated, so that we can make sure we get their feedback.
Mhm.
Okay. Anyone else have any thoughts on that? I agree. The earlier, the better. Yeah, because, yeah, it gives us some cushion. Yeah. Okay, disposal of equipment, next item. Anything to explain here?
No,
Just
just
a list.
some custodial and vehicles. And so part of our board policy.
Typical stuff.
Yeah.
Okay. Some lighting upgrades at Libertyville.
So this might be a committee meeting of cool news. So this was pretty cool. You may be surprised to hear, but Mark and I get a lot of sales calls for all kinds of things. And it is difficult sometimes to wade through what's real and what's not. And so Mark was made aware of a program through ComEd. And I believe it was a little bit hesitant at first, but then they investigated it a little bit further. And at this point, I'm going to turn it to Mark if you want to kind of walk through the rest of it.
Yeah, so we were notified by, well, actually Ray Albin was notified by a community member, a parent of a student of a program. ComEd changes their programs constantly. So as Dan said, I get contacted from companies, oh, we can replace your lighting here and do this. And, okay, show me the numbers. Well, this time it actually worked. So at no cost to the district, we were able to replace the lighting in the main gym, and the gymnastics gym, the West Gym, and believe it or not, the lights that we put in 3 years ago in the field house are failing, and they no longer make them anymore. They're already LEDs. So this program that they're in, we're actually able to replace LEDs with LEDs at no cost.
Wow.
So presently, so it's all ComEd, I sign the paperwork and then ComEd pays the contractor directly in the program. So we're working on evaluating the classrooms in the high school here that we haven't remodeled and changed the lighting on. We haven't done it for two reasons, mostly because of when we were doing remodeling in the classrooms, the majority of the classrooms don't have sprinklers. So you have to take down a ceiling. If you put up lighting and you take down a ceiling and, do all that work to retrofit the room and come back and, put sprinklers in later, we want the ceilings and the lighting. So if this works out, they can retrofit fixtures and replace fixtures. And if we can do it at no cost, we will move forward with that project this
And
summer.
there's literally no cost, no installation.
Literally no cost
nothing.
to the district.
They just come in and do it.
Yeah.
Or they reimburse our contract.
We all pay for this program when we pay our electric bills.
Right.
So the district has been paying into it. We all do it as taxpayer. If we have a ComEd or whatever our utility is, it goes in as part of your utility bill. There's
There's no cash at all flowing through the district for this. This is totally an outside program through ComEd.
What a
Why is
So
it just LHS that was considered?
In 2021, we did all the classrooms in hallways at Vernon Hills. The program wasn't available at that time. But now that they have the program available, I will take them over there and we'll look at some. We didn't do the specialty fixtures at Vernon Hills. The can lights and that, they don't really have a retrofit program for that at this time. But I can do an assessment over there for some of the lighting, the foyer and that type of thing.
That's amazing. Thank you.
Yeah.
Gains us
No,
in
thank you.
multiple
You'll see a major difference in the gyms.
Yeah, yeah.
Lights
I mean,
that
it's
have been installed.
it's better light. It's
Yeah.
going to bring brand new fixtures in, and it's going to save us money because LEDs are lower cost to operate. So it's what's there?
Yeah,
not to
and
buy?
this program is good right now, in 3 months, it might change.
Mhm.
So taking advantage of it while we can.
Yeah.
And do they have a limit on how many classrooms they will do or how many fixtures they will do?
No, there's no limit on that I'm aware of. Is, if they, can replace or retrofit the fixtures. I think they're estimating around 200,000 for classrooms. I just need to verify what they're doing and what they're not, so
Mhm.
we're working through that at this point right now.
It's wonderful.
So we won't see this at the board meeting because no action is required.
No action is required. It's already taking place. So here in a minute, when we go on a tour, we can actually pop our head into the main gym and you can see the difference in the lighting. It's all all dimmable too.
Okay,
There's
so
an app
this-
that we can go on and we can dim it. It's actually at 100%. You can't stand in there. It's way too bright.
It's really bright.
So
Well, so
it's
this is
actually
our
dimmed
chance-
down. I think we're at 75% right now. I'm not sure, but it's pretty close to 75%.
So this is our chance to save.
This would be part of the summer program. That's like I said, I want to verify they got every space. The last thing I want to do is come back and say, we did it, and then, oh, we forgot the library. Or want to make sure we can hit everything we can.
So this is our chance to say thank you to Buildings and Grounds and Finance and to ComEd for providing this very valuable enhancement,
Mhm.
not only to the lighting, but the energy efficiency and to our budget. Well done all around.
Okay, any other comments on that? Okay, we have one more agenda item. And just from a logistics standpoint, we're going to do a quick tour of the cafeteria. When we come back, we're actually going to have a special board meeting, but it's for a closed session. And so we'll be relocating to another space. So we'll be vacating this room once we come back. So I won't call us adjourned yet because this is part of the committee meeting.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So we'll call it adjourned afterwards.
Currently on break. 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 Currently on break.
Okay, we're back. Thank you for the tour. That was very, very enlightening. That was very helpful. We appreciate it. So at this point in time, I'm going to call close the, or
Future
adjourn.
agenda items.
Oh, future agenda items. I'm sorry. So list of future agenda items on this, on the document to review.
And I noticed there's nothing about solar on that last meeting in April. Just pointing it out.
You should have it. You should have had an update on Friday. This is that included update on solar, but
He probably hasn't
yeah.
had a chance to read it yet.
There you go.
We will just, we'll talk about it on the agenda meeting next week. So future agenda items. Okay. Anything else for the FNF? Okay, I will call this meeting adjourned, and then as long as I got the gavel here, We will open our special board meeting. Carol, are you ready? Okay. Can we have a roll call, please, when you're ready?
Batson. I'm
Here.
sorry, Jim Batson.
Here.
Kara Benjamin.
Here.
Don Carmichael.
Here.
Kara Drumkey.
Here.
Lisa Hessel.
Here.
Middleish Cotwall.
Here.
Sonal Kulkarni.
Here.
Okay, purpose of this meeting is we're going to have a closed session. So, and we will not have any action after the closed session. So we will go into closed session. We need a motion to go into closed session for negotiating matters, contract negotiating matters, 5 ILCS 120/C1? C2. I thought it was C2.
Carmichael, so moved.
Drumkey, second.
Any comments? Nope. Okay.
Benjamin.
Aye.
Carmichael.
Aye.
Drumkey.
Aye.
Hessel. Cotwall.
Aye.
Kulkarni.
Aye.
Batson.
Aye. And as mentioned before, there will be no action taken afterwards. So for those of you out there, good night.